Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Eric.
And we have a loaded show for you this week. We are going to be talking a return to a George Lucas classic, Guy Ritchie's return to form in a World War II story based on a true story. But we are going to kick things off with Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. This one, it's a tennis movie, but really, I saw somebody say it was like a throuple set in the world of professional tennis. That feels somewhat on brand.
Misleading, but
true. Challengers mostly focuses on these three characters, and the moments that follow this picture play prominently into a lot of the story here. But we begin in 2019 with a couple of tennis players, Patrick Zweig, played by Josh O'Connor, and Art Donaldson, played by Mike Feist. They are playing in the championship game of a challenger tournament in upstate New York to qualify for the U.S. Open. There's a lot of tension. You can tell immediately. And almost as soon as that game gets underway, we start our first series of flashbacks 13 years earlier when they were playing at the junior version of the tournament, and they were actually doubles partners, best friends. They get drawn to the superstar female player played by Zendaya, that's Tashi, and they go to a victory party for her after she wins the women's championship. They are all not only doubles partners, but due to face each other in the men's singles championship the next morning. Boys probably, because I think they're supposed to be high school, just on the cusp. Because Art and Tashi are about to go to Stanford.
Yeah.
Patrick has no interest in higher education or probably structure of any kind as we go through this film. So we get to see their relationship play out over the course of 13 years in the flashbacks in between tense sets on the court. Art transformed himself into a polished professional player with a mountain of championships. He's never won the U.S. Open, though, hoping to get back there. And he is coming, when we see him in 2019, he's recovering from an injury. He's now married to Tashi, who had a career-ending injury while she was in college, went through kind of the cycle. Meanwhile, Patrick had seemed like the more promising of the two male players in the early part of flashbacks, but kind of his career peters out. And as he arrives at this championship tournament, he is nearly broke and on his last leg of his professional career, trying to jumpstart things. It's a lot of tension, a lot of interconnected romance and drama going on here. Pretty kicking soundtrack at times. Really enjoyed the score. It pulled me in. I feel like it's a score just like the score in Poor Things. You're either going to love it and it's going to really work for you with the visuals you're seeing, or it is going to kill you. Because I know, talking to our friend Ricky, I mentioned I enjoyed the score, and I thought that was going to end the friendship for a minute. So I take it you were not a fan of the score. I'm giving this movie thumbs up. I liked it a lot. I love the smoldering intensity and tension. I actually have it third for the year for me right now, behind Dune Part 2 and Civil War. You look like you didn't enjoy it quite as much.
I give this movie 2 full thumbs up. I loved every frame, every beat of this movie.
You're scaring me with your
drop.
I
love Challengers. What the face that you're reading is me relishing that Luca Guadagnino, my man, like pulled through, because you were on the fence. Like, you haven't liked a lot of his other movies.
Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
Oh my gosh, this movie. I don't want to explain anything in the spoilers, because here's the thing. This has been a weird year for marketing. We've been talking a lot about this movie's trailer lied about it. This was negative. This was positive. They should have marketed Abigail differently. This movie's marketing is perfect. It sets you up with an expectation that drives you into the tension of the movie before you've even seen the movie. And so I really want people to go into this as blind as possible so you get the full ride.
It also So some of the run up, I remember, especially last year. So this movie was originally slated to come out. I think it was supposed to have been September, October. It was one of the films that got pushed off. It was one of the first ones to bail out and come into 24 when the writing acting strikes started.
I can tell why. This would have got lost in a shuffle.
Well, there was also a lot of talk at the time about it potentially getting an NC-17, and the way that they do the marketing, I think, gives you the impression,
Yes.
some of that it's going to be more salacious than it is.
Yeah, that's what I don't want to spoil. I think everyone has an expectation of
Well,
what is going to happen by watching that trailer.
but I think it is fair to note, if you were on the fence saying this isn't probably something you want to see because you don't want to get hit with gratuity, this isn't a film about gratuity, is what I would
Nope.
say.
I was trying harder than I've ever tried before, to not make verbal noises rooting for this.
I knew he was going to do
The
it.
tennis racket. I knew it.
You
And
knew
I
it
was
gonna happen.
begging for it. I wasn't surprised. I was like, please do it. And he goes up like this. And I'm like, ugh! And he does it again. And I'm like,
and I also, the ending, I think, so there's a couple of things that I think either are really going to work for people or not. I mentioned the score, which, there are scores that like are beautiful because they just like become part of this one. I wouldn't say it becomes part of it. It is driving you to a certain mood. And
yeah.
so that worked for me. But there are people where they don't like, I think they don't appreciate the conscious presence of a score.
Well, that's the thing that I thought was so beautiful about this score is it is more, it makes me think of a David Fincher sort of mood setting piece until it grabs your attention on purpose and makes you pay attention to things. And I think those are the beats that irritate people that the music does not work for, is when it's just like constantly revving up with the same like sort of like presence, and at moments when it's like, hey, you need to start paying attention because something is happening that's subtextual or important, and there's a lot of tension here, and it's like throttling you. So like there's a lot of easing into the back of your brain that there's a mood going on, and then snapping your attention to it. And I thought it was perfect.
I thought it was a fantastic way to help build the tension. I also have enjoyed, not that they're the same, but other kinds of sports movies like this where you have the ongoing game that they're playing, but you're also getting flashbacks. Like one of my favorite sports films is For Love of the Game, where Kevin Costner is out there. Not that it's remotely the same exactly, but where he's out there pitching like this game and potentially a perfect game, but we're having this flashback of his career and his life and his relationship, and you're seeing all this tension build. That one, based on a novel by Michael Shara, and the way it's put together, I have always appreciated that tension. There was elements of that here. You have this basic, back and forth tennis match, and they really lean into that tennis match feel, and and it being a game, a back and forth game, and a back and forth momentum game, and you feel that in the flashbacks. But I also think
in dialogue, the camera teaches you a language of following the ball, and they use that in dialogue, and it's
the other thing that I feel will end up being real polarizing is the ending, which I think fits. They drop pretty major clues to it early when these three first connect, when they're talking about what tennis is, and so I thought it was fitting to that sense. But
fitting is the right word.
It's not a quintessential American ideal of an ending.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not a resolution, which is upsetting on some level. But not
I wouldn't even say it's not
level.
a resolution. I would just say,
well, what happens after? Like,
well, yeah. But, and I think so. Those are some of the complaints I've seen from people that didn't care for it, is some of the aesthetic of the mood that they're creating. Well, I mean, that's why film ultimately is subjective in some ways. I mean,
True.
even you and I have seen the same movie and not appreciated it in the same way, or one
No,
of us
I
not
know.
appreciated it at all. But I, those are two things that probably that I think have taken some people out of it that I actually appreciated about it.
Mhm. Sure, which is fair because viewers may go into it with this. Like, it's fair to set the expectations that people might have, and with that, I will tell you that the thing that does come with this is it is a story that ties you in by really well structuring the story over a long period of time. So it's enough to keep you engrossed and engaged. But if you take two steps back to think about what kind of people these are and what they're choosing to do with their lives, if someone just told me about who the people were and told me they had a story to tell, I wouldn't want to hear their story. And so there's a lot of potentially not feeling good about, like, honestly, how you spent your time. If enough things don't go right for you watching this movie, I can imagine being like, what did this add to my life?
And what's been amazing for me is I currently, I do kind of a running throughout the year tally now, because when it gets to end of the year voting, it's too hard to remember things. But I currently have Zendaya with 2 of the 3 best lead female performances of the year.
Yeah. This is second best to Dune Part 2 that I've seen this year.
I put Kirsten
Hands
Dunst
down.
between them for Civil War.
Civil War is incredible. I think that's my number 3. After that, I don't know. What's your 4 and 5? Because how did you know? Like, man, but I mean, we've had so many heavy hitting good movies coming all of a sudden.
I think 4 for me is Girl State, if I recall.
Girl State. Okay, I haven't seen that. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's a documentary.
Girl.
Well, I incredibly loved Boys State, which came out in 2020. Girl State is a similar concept. And then, current top 12, at 12, Monkey Man. At 11,
Monkey Man was so good.
At 11, the Prime Video original Musica. I really kind of loved what they were putting down there. I have Arthur the King at 10.
Is that good?
You Can Miss Me with Your it's not high art. I thought it was really entertaining for what it was, and it was much more emotionally engaging than I was expecting, and it had some cool sequences. I like Simu Liu, I like Mark Wahlberg, I like Nathalie Emmanuel, who are all together. Dar Slim. It was a good group, and you know what? Sometimes an animal story is delightful. It's based on a true story. I thought that made it more interesting. At 9, I have Godzilla versus Kong: The New Empire.
That's the one you actually have to defend, but you don't have to do that now.
I mean, I thought it was for what it is what it's supposed to be. I also try to evaluate films for, are they what they're supposed to be,
with
and
context.
Are they enjoyable in addition to being well made? And I actually, as I mentioned when we did it, I liked that one more than some of the ones before it. I have a Hulu original called The Greatest Hits, that is at number 8 for me. It has a very high concept, kind of concept about what you would be willing to, it asks this question, the same question that's in that Garth Brooks song, The Dance. If you knew what it was going to cost you, would you still go through with the decision, especially involving a relationship? Nice. It had interesting twists. I liked the American Society of Magical Negroes more than anyone in the history of time, probably more than the director's family. So I have it at 7. Then I have actually the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare at 6. Wow. I have Abigail at 5. Girl State at 4. Challenger, Civil War, Dune Part 2.
Wow. Yep. So I think my top 5 have got to be Dune Part 2, Challengers, Civil War, Monkey Man, and Miller's Girl, which I'm not 100% sure on, but it just dropped on Netflix, so I'm going to find out.
Oh, you're gonna watch it again? Yeah.
I don't know that that's a good idea, but I'm gonna watch it
I mean,
again
it
because
had some
it's
excellent
stuck with me.
dialogue, but
Yeah, they're just I want to decide for myself if they actually kissed. Like, I don't feel like I grasped everything by the end of that movie. And so, I don't know. Anyways, yeah.
well, it seems a good segue to our next film, which is actually The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. This one actually dropped April 19th in theaters. We wanted to come back to it. I saw it last weekend. I told you I really enjoyed it. Obviously, just mentioned that I have it up there in my top 10 right now. This one is set in World War II. Winston Churchill, played by Rory Kinnear, at the behest of a brigadier general in charge of intelligence, codenamed M, played by Carrie Elways, and assisted by Ian Fleming. Yes, that Ian
Yeah.
Fleming. Uh, co- Convenes a special mission force to basically go and try to wipe out the supply ships that are helping the Germans maintain control of the North Atlantic Sea by refitting and resupplying their U-boats. To lead that, they tap Captain Gus March Phillips, who is a little bit of an unconventional soldier, played by Henry Cavill. He recruits a team that includes Alan Richardson, who you would probably recognize from the small screen as Jack Reacher, Alex Pettifer, who this is probably the best part he's been in. I'm going to be
Yep.
honest. Henry Golding, who I've enjoyed in quite a few things, and Hero Finds Tiffin, who's probably best known for that After franchise on Netflix. They also are working with a couple of spies, Babs. Olsenmokun. I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, but if you watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds, he is the doctor. I was thrilled to see him, and Isaac Gonzalez. And they are going to infiltrate the port and to try to distract the head of the German army there, played by Till Schweiger. This one comes from Guy Ritchie. We've seen him do a lot of different things over the years. I was actually one who enjoyed his version of Aladdin. I enjoyed his version of Sherlock Holmes, but I will say, for those that have been waiting for him to kind of go back to some of his roots, I really got a kick out of his Netflix series, The Gentleman, which is kind of set in the same cinematic tone and world as the Matthew McConaughey film, although it's got completely different characters. Theo James, Kayla Scolatorino are incredible in that. That is still actually sitting up there in my top 10 shows of the year so far. He brings that same energy. If you were a big fan of Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels, and Snatch, that same energy is in this movie. I like the back and forth witty dialogue. There's plenty of action. This one was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the ride from beginning to end. I'm giving it thumbs up.
I had a blast with this. This is what a good week at the movies. What the hell? The story is fascinating. I'm sure it's embellished for the theatrical run, and there's something comforting about sometimes when you're able to recognize, because of like the lighting of a scene, like this is in a studio. There's something so fun still about that. Like, this is just a really competently made, recognizably Guy Ritchie movie, and Henry Cavill is amazing, and I am so excited to see like more new things from him. So I'm kind of bummed about the rumor that he's Wolverine, because I kind of don't want to see him locked into one character long term. And Alan Richardson really surprised me, and Alex Pettifer also.
This is probably the best I've seen of Alex Pettifer, because he played a lot of like moody teen films a few years ago. I had to look up who it was. I'm like, I recognize the face, but I don't recognize the suave style here. But if you have watched Reacher on Prime Video, Alan Richardson kills it in that role. So I was not surprised that he brought that to this.
This is really dumb, but for some reason I knew I liked him because he was Raphael in the Michael Bay produced Ninja Turtles movies. And
I wasn't expecting us to go there, but
say what you will about those movies, but the personalities of the turtles are pretty accurate, and I think he did a really good job with that. But I haven't seen him in like Jack Reacher or anything like that, so like I was like, but he was a highlight, man. Like Guy Ritchie, I love Guy Ritchie, and this really falls kind
it's
of more
been
in
a
the
good
vein of
2024 so far for him,
Sherlock
because like
Holmes.
if you enjoy vintage Guy Ritchie, the Netflix series, it's a quick 8-episode watch. I'm hoping they'll renew it. Is a lot of fun. Vinnie Jones is in there, some people you would recognize from his previous work, but Theo James kills it, and I loved what they did here. And seeing, I liked at the end that you got to see some of the real life people, because Gus March
Yeah.
Phillips is allegedly the real life persona that Ian Fleming based James Bond upon, because he was part of this kind of secret action group. I was fascinated to learn the real life personal relationship between a couple of these characters, because you don't really see them interact hardly at all in this movie.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't know if
and
you caught that at the end, but I was like, oh, interesting.
which part?
Gus March Phillips in real life married Marjorie Stewart.
Oh, yeah. No, you
So,
know what? I
but
think
in the movie, you kind of see him. He like helps her down in at the end, but
right.
they didn't. It's almost a 2-hour movie, and you don't really see them.
Their interaction made me for a second go, are they supposed to be a thing? And then I was like, no, I'm just filling in the blanks in my head of conventional leading male, conventional leading female. Like that's not. And then it says they're married, and I'm like, well, great job
Well,
subtly playing like
they got
interests.
married, so maybe they met on the mission.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Oh man.
It was fun. It sounds like you enjoyed it a lot too.
Oh, I had a blast. Like,
April
but it's a
has not
very
disappointed.
April has not disappointed, and again, I get so excited just watching the previews lately this year. I feel like we're just gearing up for some
I mean,
we have so many lulled waters, like weeks where we don't think anything big is coming, and then like a few punchy heavy hitters like Deadpool and like, well, for me, Furiosa and all that. I'm just so
see,
excited.
that's May has some big shoes to fill, because beyond the Fall Guy, I'm not. I'm mid on seeing Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, or
Whatever
seeing
Kingdom,
Planet of
yeah,
the Apes or Mad Max continue on my screen. I'm mid on that. I have some decent hopes for If. I'm a little worried about Back to Black. I mean, there are some good things, but I was trying to remember what was so this month. Weekend 1 was Monkey Man. Weekend 2 was Civil War. Last weekend was Abigail and Ungentlemanly Warfare, and this weekend was Challengers and Boy Kills World, which I saw. I didn't love it, but I think is probably for people that just like all out orgy of violence will be pleased.
Okay, I'm gonna see it then.
So
I
I mean,
was on the
it's
fence.
been there is a banger in every weekend.
Yeah.
Every weekend in April produced at least one film that has landed in my current top 12. So, challenge accepted, May.
Yeah.
Can Garfield with Chris Pratt make
all of the wind just left my sails?
Well, May
water.
is going to kickstart with we already know and have seen and have embraced one of the big releases for next weekend. In case you missed it, May 4th every year is Star Wars Day, and this Star Wars Day weekend, in honor of it turning 25, which still makes me feel old. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is making a return to theaters. There's probably generations of people that had never got a chance to see it in theaters. It was first originally in theaters, came out in, I think it was the first weekend in May or the second weekend in May of '99. I remember that was right about when I was graduating from high school. So it's really causing some introspection for me. Episode 1 was 99, so it was 16 years after a Return of the Jedi. They came back and made the prequels. This movie was probably not what people were expecting, especially like original trilogy purists. And I would say my opinion of this movie has changed over time. I can't give it a thumbs up, but I will not be cruel. I will give it a thumbs neutral. I feel about this movie probably the same way that I feel about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, in that it's a piece of a larger franchise that could be a gateway for younger viewers and suffers because it is more or less a children's movie. And within that, I think we got a couple of cool things. I think the pod racing sequence was pretty fun. We got a pretty killer lightsaber battle, a three-way lightsaber battle. We got a cool looking villain in what? It's three.
I'm just thinking left to right for the pod racing, and then a three-way duel. And I'm just thinking about challengers again for some reason.
We got a cool looking villain. I wish they would have had him in more films or known what to do with him, although that does detract from the power of that sequence. And we got an all-time banger of a song in Duel of the Fates, which is probably one of John Williams' better musical. I mean, you hear that music and you just like your heart starts. It's the equivalent of listening to the Challengers soundtrack for 6 hours straight. Your heart is going, you are just banging out. But I mean, you also have the misguided Jar Jar Binks, which even 25 years later, I recently rewatched this and I'm like, this feels like almost an even worse look. You also have the tough beat of a really mid child actor. No offense to David Lloyd, who he was trying his best, but probably mid dialogue and mid script based on what we experienced as we went through the rest of the prequels. But the trying to set up a romance between somebody who looks like they're very obviously like 5 to 10 years old and somebody who very obviously looks like they're around 20 years old is beyond uncomfortable. It's more uncomfortable now than I even remember it being when I first saw it when I was 18 years old. So I probably not going to rush out and see it again in theaters. I've seen it a few times. I just recently rewatched it, but it to me is not the worst of the feature films, and that's probably the kindest thing I think we can say 25 years later.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I never know where to start with this. I'm going to start at the most recent digestible information of this ongoing thread. The Star Wars prequels are a constantly plucking string in my brain because a big thing that I like to do is edit media, movies, things like that. And my interest in that was developed. Most of the way that I learned to edit is by editing fan edits of the prequels. So I've seen them hundreds of times. And I have like the scene that I know from each movie that is the first thing that I cut out of the movie. In this case, that is the reshoot scene where Qui-Gon Jinn is sitting next to Obi-Wan and they like make up after having an argument about whether Anakin should be trained. And that's for a long, the annoying, boring reason. So I will say the fascinating thing about episode 1 is it was made out of such instability and drive and originality. This person was so sure what they wanted, but then just kept changing it as he went along. They just recently finally released concept art of what this movie looked like when there was no Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan was the only character who showed up on Naboo and the only character who met him. All of Qui-Gon's parts were consolidated into him. The reason Qui-Gon was added after they had already done concept art and writing for the movie was to establish more of a brother dynamic between Obi-Wan and Anakin, so there had to be a father figure. And I feel like that took a huge cut out of Obi-Wan's character for this movie. And there's so much in the making of this movie. Like when they cast the original trilogy, they cast for chemistry. They wanted characters that would work together. When they cast for this movie, this comes from sources from, if you listen to the podcast, Mr. Sunday Movies. They cast for visuals because these movies were written to play visually. The dialogue was an afterthought. If you mute everything but the music, these movies play like operas and you can understand everything that is going on without anyone talking. And I really badly want versions of the movie that do that, just play out a big visual operatic thing just with those themes. The first one is Duel of the Fates. From Attack of the Clones, it's Across the Stars. And from Revenge of the Sith, it's Battle of the Heroes. There are these anthems to each episode in this thing. And the unfortunate thing is that where I think the first one is not the worst in this trilogy, it ends up being the most needless outside of that Duel of the Fates, outside of that lightsaber fight. The core nugget of important story that happens in this movie is Anakin Skywalker is established as someone important, and it is made known that how he is raised and what he will come to be is important. All of that information is in that fight. And the rest of the stuff gets reestablished in movie 2 like it's brand new, like Anakin and Padme's relationship and like Jar Jar like disappears from the series basically, like
well, no, I mean,
Chancellor and
Jar Jar stays there and is the one that casts some of the deciding votes for
yep. And
Senator Binks.
Yeah.
But I think
hello,
part of me thinks that they really fled from featuring the Gungans because of the blowback, even in '99 to those decisions was.
But see, that's
pretty...
the wild thing about these movies is they constantly stand up as pinnacles of innovation. And Phantom Menace was one of the first movies to be digitally projected in a theater.
And see, that's the other thing that I think, as you reflect on the prequel trilogy, they were a little too early because we were just starting the technology, and now if he was making those, if he had started it in like 2010 instead of 99, I wonder what that would have been. I mean, you still have dialogue issues, but they so obviously look like they're green screen, and people weren't used to green screen. And I think that really jacks with some of their performance. Like, we know Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, and Natalie Portman are good actors. We know Samuel L. Jackson is a good actor. They don't always look, I mean, sometimes they look like they have not Neeson, because I feel like he does, but especially in this first movie, there are some rough sequences with Natalie Portman and Ewan McGregor, and I don't think it's because of them as performers. I think it's because, like, where are we supposed to look, and what is this going to look like? It's hard to even imagine what this, and that is something that Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill didn't have to deal with. They had to try to imagine some things, doing things in miniatures, and I'm sure they didn't totally know how it was going to come together, but there was more grounded, real sets and real tangible things. You can tell so much of this was like 3 people dressed up, standing in an entirely green room, waiting to see what was going to happen. And even the way it all blends together, it very much looks like the live action equivalent of the Clone Wars animated series, because everything looks animated. And that's probably why the Clone Wars animated series looks so perfect in between there, because it is an animated world. But I mean, that's almost, to me, by the time you get to Revenge of the Sith, they're starting to fix some of that, but that still has some like horrendous, and you probably shouldn't have just gone all out and digitized Yoda. You had to, I guess, for his kind of cool lightsaber actions in a few of them, but
remember, he was a puppet. The remaster, which you would have seen in theaters and people would be seeing now, has digital Yoda in the first one, but there's a weird looking puppet in the original release. In the first one, digital Yoda showed up in Attack of the Clones. But that's the paradox of the prequels, is if they didn't go exactly as far as they went, Lord of the Rings would have been the hallmark for advancing digital cinema and special effects.
I mean, it still probably is because of the way it looks. They also used more real
I'm
sets
saying
than-
all that technology doesn't come to be what it does in the 2010s without George. We don't start filming movies digitally at all on a large scale if Attack of the Clones is not made. We don't like, or maybe we do somehow, but we don't know how. That's the crazy thing, is these movies, as bad as they are the reason that we can edit on our phones.
So I'm going to say, of the prequels, there's one actually decent, good movie in there.
Yeah.
I still think Phantom Menace probably gets more hate than it deserves, but it is decidedly a kid's movie. There is one that is a certified turd.
Yep.
So I imagine. So do you have Attack of the Clones
Same
as your
rankings.
lowest? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know when we'll get to talk about it, so I'll just go ahead and say, to me, Attack of the Clones is the coolest idea. So its abomination of execution is the hardest hit.
Like, that relationship piece is so important, and it's so poorly constructed. The dialogue there probably is more painful than it even is in episode
the first scene I cut out of Attack of the Clones, the first scene I cut out of any of them ever,
is when
is
he's
the
talking about
fireplace
Sam.
scene.
Oh,
the fireplace scene.
Yeah. None of the romance just works on that. I am actually on Thursday. My ranking for Star Wars will publish for binge watch. So if you want to give them, I mean, we're going into Star Wars Day.
Yeah,
we can do. In my binge watch article, I did include the Star Wars Holiday Special, which you can find on YouTube, despite all of George Lucas's attempts to scrub it from the collective memory. And that one's number 12 for me. But if we're talking about the 11 feature films, I can go first, or you can go first. It doesn't matter.
You go ahead.
So at 11, I have Attack of the Clones. Let me pull it up so I don't mess one up. At 10, I have the Phantom Menace, which, I mentioned it's not horrendous, but it's not great either. This is probably where I step out into people will start questioning things. 9 for me, I have The Force Awakens, which I think is fine, but it's like purely nostalgia. Some of the things that you said about the Phantom Menace not being entirely necessary based on the movies that came after it, I would apply to The Force Awakens.
Yeah, well, hey.
At 8, I have Solo, A Star Wars Story, which I don't think is incredible, but has some moments. So there's one film I find terrible. There's one that I find disappointing. The rest, I would say, from 9 up, are all watchable to varying degrees. And you might even get excited about them. So that was 9, 8, 7. I have Return of the Jedi, which I think it's a solid film. I enjoy it. I just don't love it as much as I did when I was a child. Then number 6 for me, I have Revenge of the Sith. I actually think that may have the best lightsaber fight of all of the Star Wars movies, and it has one of the coolest settings, that the whole world being basically a volcano. The way it goes dark, there are some objectionable ways that they pull it all together. The never really explaining what happened to Padme in a sufficient way, and some of the ending sequences there, they really did Natalie Portman dirty.
They really did, for having such a competent actress. And again, that's what pisses me off the most about too. But whatever, you go.
So 5 for me is Rise of Skywalker, and I acknowledge that a lot of people dislike it. And when I was rewatching, I thought, oh, I'm gonna end up having to drop this. And then we get to the middle of the movie, and the set pieces work for me, and the emotional back and forth works for me. The return of Harrison Ford works for me. I really enjoy Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley back and forth. Justice for Kelly Marie Tran, who gets marginalized entirely in that movie, but the closing battle sequence and some of the emotion of those worked for me. Then 4, I have A New Hope. 3, I have Rogue One. 2, I have The Empire Strikes Back, and number 1 for me is The Last Jedi, which I maintain is the best performance and story arc for Luke Skywalker of the entire Star Wars franchise.
I'm just gonna let that sit for a minute.
I mean, I love the visuals, the emotion. Again, there are a couple of weird things that I think we've talked about in there, but I love the storyline for Admiral Holda and what she does there. And Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley part worked for me. Luke Skywalker's arc worked for me. His confronting Kylo Ren worked for me.
I'm gonna get to it. My rankings out of you count 12 because you put the holiday special at the end, right? So there's 11.
Indeed. Yeah, there's 11 feature films.
Right. So bottom is Attack of the Clones. Second from the bottom is Rise of Skywalker. I think that movie is abhorrently insulting intellectually, personally. And I get like why other people are okay with it. And I, whatever. It is what it is at this point. It's not like you set up the entire premise of your story around the concept that a guy couldn't use the Force to heal his wife or whatever, But anyways, we're gonna move on. So 9, that would make 9 Phantom Menace. 8 would then be Return of the Jedi. 7 would be Revenge of the Sith. 6 would be The Force Awakens. 5 would be... What am I missing here?
Well, you still have Solo, Rogue One.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. Okay. So where did I just say Revenge of the Sith was 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. So 7 is Solo, 6 is Rogue One, 5 is Revenge of the Sith, 4 is Return of the Jedi, 3 is The Last Jedi, or 3 is A New Hope, 2 is The Last Jedi, 1 is The Empire Strikes Back. I agree with you about The Last Jedi almost entirely. It's just that every great thing in that movie is peppered with irritating little details like Holdo. You could have exactly that great arc with her without her having to split Poe off into a side story. You could do it easily. Like Luke Skywalker could have exactly the same arc he has without having the flashbacks and having it be about him personally almost killing someone or not. Like, you can have it just be the tragedy that his efforts to build a school fell because of the Knights of Ren and actually turn the Knights of Ren into something we cared about by Rise of Skywalker.
I'm going to tell you, Poe has the same story arc as Luke Skywalker. What is the major thing that Yoda tells Luke? We learn from our failures.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, but that's the thing. That's the hard part about the movie is that the theme of it is failure. And yet they do that. They drill that so hard that I feel like they shoot themselves in the foot a couple of times, like with Kelly Marie Tran, who is outstanding as a concept of a character and is very well performed, but is written to be selfish and dumb in a moment where she, in my opinion, robs Finn of an amazing story arc. Now, I did not want to see Finn die. I didn't. But that arc of a character who lived as a stormtrooper, who then transitioned to care about his own interests and disappear in Force Awakens, only to come back and decide to fight for a cause and go from being someone who's fighting for the First Order for himself to someone who gives himself for the rebels and freedom. That is an amazing story that is then completely punched out of the air by Kelly Marie Tran, who claims that that is to save people, but by her doing that, she allows everyone else she knows more and cares about more be shot with a cannon. It's just, they cared so hard about the emotions in that scene that I think they just missed what it actually meant was happening on screen. Like, a certain amount of failure makes sense. With Poe, it makes sense. The only thing that I would do different with Poe is just tell him that what you're going to do, and have Poe say that's not good enough and him go and try and do things himself so that he has agency, and it's not just commanders proving a point in the middle of a life and death situation. It's just tweaks. Like, The Last Jedi is so good and makes so sense and gives the best representation of the Force and is just emotionally so perfect in so many ways. And a lot of the subversion of expectations. 2 lightsabers, never touch. It's beautiful. It's peppered with all these little stingers that is just like, okay. And I'm saying that edit brain in my head where I'm like, I want to do a fan edit of this, wants to do it, but you can't take some fundamental things out of that movie without it just having holes in it and it not, flowing. So I don't know, man. That's just why it's not my number one. That's why Empire's still up there.
Oh, I know. I am out on an island. For most people, Last Jedi is their number 7.
I know.
So,
I know. For Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker to be my second to best and second to last, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely higher on Force Awakens than I am. I don't mind it. I just, the more I watch it, the more it kind of pisses me off in that it's like it doesn't have an original thought to string together to save its life. And honestly, I feel like they were originally going to kill Poe, and then they cast Oscar.
They were. No, they 100% were.
And they're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah, but he dies in the script, and they liked him. That's, yeah.
Well, and you feel that in the entirety of the production. Like, I don't know.
No, as those movies go along, you can feel more and more that they had no roadmap. And that is to me, that is the most, as a child who grew up with the prequels, it's really weird that the sequels are my prequels.
Yeah.
Because I would think that the way people think about Revenge of the Sith as being like a really good movie out of those movies, that's the way I feel about The Last Jedi. It's just that The Last Jedi is in many ways objectively a better movie than Revenge of the Sith. And yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. Plenty of good options to see in April. We'll see if May gets off to a good start. We will be back in 2 weeks. You can enjoy a Cinco de Mayo break, maybe catch up on all of April, or just watch the Phantom Menace on a loop for 24 hours straight on Saturday, and then enjoy all that Cinco de Mayo has to offer in terms of tequila to recover on Sunday. But I will be out, so we will be off. But when we come back on May 12th, we will have the Fall Guy, which should be a lot of fun.
This is my most anticipated of the year.
Is it Dawn of the Planet of the
Kingdom
of the Planet of the Apes? All those names.
Before we go,
so long. Yes,
I want to tell you the scene that I always cut out of Revenge of the Sith. because if you haven't noticed this, it will kill you from here on out. The scene where Anakin and Padme are on the balcony together, and it was reshoots, and she was in the middle of filming V for Vendetta, so she turns around and she looks like an absolute skeleton with a wig on. That's all.
Maybe that's what being Darth Vader's boo will do to you.
Because her life force is draining and she doesn't know why.
Well, if you feel the need after this to catch up on all of Star Wars, all 11 feature films, plus some Ewok shenanigans are streaming on Disney Plus. And they're actually dropping a new live action series or a new animated series on Saturday the 4th as well. So that'll do it for us. Until we meet again, we will see you guys at the movies.